Good morning. Yesterday, Joe Biden hosted a party at the White House to celebrate his Inflation Expansion Act. On the same day, that scorching inflation numbers came in hotter than expected, and the stock market plunged. President Biden and House Democrats' reckless spending and failed far-left policies have plunged our economy into a recession, stolen wages from America's workforce, destroyed retirement savings, particularly impacting seniors in my district and across America, and left families with the highest food prices since 1979. Everywhere I traveled across my district, everyone I spoke with across America throughout August, I heard about the pain that so many constituents are feeling due to Joe Biden and House Democrats' failed radical policies. And my colleagues are here today to share those similar stories about what they heard this August recess. What are the realities that the American people are facing? The Democrats' inflation crisis has New Yorkers paying nearly $700 more per month and is expected to cost families across my state more than $8,000 a year. That's, in many cases, a month's salary. If you look at the inflation rate, it's taking away a month's salary of every American family. Wages aren't keeping up with inflation as everything is costing more. Americans are making less. Grocery prices are leaving many families struggling to put food on the table. Families are struggling to afford their gas and energy prices due to Democrats' war on American energy that's only predicted to get worse. This winter, families across my district in upstate New York and the North Country are expected to pay the highest price to heat their homes in well over a decade. The lawlessness and rampant violent crime continues in our communities due to Democrats' soft-on-crime policies. And the sad part is, Democrats know the consequences of their radical policies, and they continue to double down. Today, Vice President Kamala Harris is continuing this tone-deaf celebration in upstate New York, applauding and selling a law that helps the wealthy and inflicts further pain on hardworking families. The American people cannot afford another year of failed Democrat one-party rule in Washington. It's time for leadership that listens to the concerns of every American, which House Republicans are doing every day. We are working hard to end this one-party Democrat reign in Washington and put forth our commitment to America that works for our constituents and the American people. And with that, I will yield to my colleague from California, Congressman David Valadao.
Thanks, Elise. Good morning. Thank you for being here today. My Central Valley district is made up of a lot of rural communities where most families already live paycheck to paycheck. I spent the last month back home talking to a lot of different groups of people, and the biggest concern that kept coming up in all these conversations was just how expensive it is to live. Earlier this week, I talked to probably 500-600 farm workers in Delano, and whose main complaint, and I spent quite a bit of time with them, the biggest concern that kept coming up in every one of these conversations was exactly how expensive it is to live. But as I talked to these folks, groceries, the cost of fuel, putting gas in their cars as they drive to work was the biggest issue that they brought up. I met with farmers and growers and truckers who have all been hit by the cost of rising diesel and the lack of parts to even keep their equipment running. Some of the farmers said that they needed a third tractor just to be able to keep two of them in the field so they can wait for parts for that last one. I hear from businesses across all different kinds of industries that want to invest in new technologies to create jobs in California, but they don't have a reliable electricity needed to keep these to make these investments worth it. It's frustrating because we have resources right here in our own backyard that can and should be used. And the energy we produce here in the United States is cleaner than anywhere else in the world. But the Biden administration and Governor Newsom are making it nearly impossible to produce energy here in the U.S. Biden has issued very few permits, and Newsom is suing to prevent these very few permits from even moving forward. These permits that are being held up have a direct impact on communities like Kern County, where the oil industry helps fund law enforcement, firefighters, public schools, and is responsible for over 38,000 jobs. People I talk to are really worried about the trickle-down effect this energy crisis is going to have across our community. The threat of rolling blackouts in California should be a warning to the rest of the country that the Democrats' energy policies have created a crisis. Families across the Central Valley are already struggling to put food on their table and keep their air conditioning running and put gas in their cars, while the president is celebrating billions in new government spending. It's out of touch with reality and doesn't do anything to make life better for my constituents in the Central Valley. So thank you. And next I'm going to introduce my friend, Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis from New York.
Thank you. I want to thank the leadership for bringing us together to talk about the real issues, the real crises that the American people are facing right now. You heard about inflation and cost of living, and that is also what I'm hearing as a top issue in my district. But the other issue is crime. And the reality is, under one-party rule at the national level and the state level and the city level, we have seen crime skyrocketing in many of America's cities. In New York City, crime is once again up 35% compared to last year. And again, that's 2021. It was above 2020, and it keeps on increasing year after year by double digits. Everything from rape to robbery, felony assault, burglary, grand theft auto, transit crimes, sex crimes, they're all up. And people in my city do not feel safe. And there are a number of policies that have led to this. First, the bail law that the governor and the state legislature put in place. I've introduced legislation here at the federal level that would require that states allow judicial discretion to consider people's dangerousness to society. We have people here on the street who have been released repeatedly. In fact, the top 10 career criminals since the bail law took effect combined have been racked up about 500 arrests, and many of them are still on the street today. Topping the NYPD's list of notable career criminals is Harold Gooding, who's been busted a total of 101 times, with 88 coming since the bail reform was enacted. So think about that. Majority of those crimes just in the last 2 years, thanks to the Democrats who are in control of our city and Washington's refusal to enact legislation like mine that would rein in prosecutors and hold them accountable and expose how many of these career criminals they're releasing, as well as my legislation to require that states allow for dangerousness to be considered by judges. A serial thief allegedly told cops that she was a professional criminal following her 97th arrest in February. She was just finally locked up in July after her 101 arrest, in which she was charged with attacking 2 cops in Harlem. And a few weeks ago, a Manhattan judge let a career criminal on lifetime parole walk free twice in 1 week without bail, even though a prosecutor had asked for it. He had, again, a whole slew of convictions, misdemeanor and felony convictions, and he had been, as I said, on parole. We have a governor, by the way, who has put together a parole board that has released dozens of cop killers in just the last 5 years, murderers, rapists, you name it. And then, of course, we have another subway attacker who, for three years after he was arrested, he had 40 times he had been arrested for various crimes. And that's why people feel unsafe riding New York City's subway. And then, of course, we have the last example, a career criminal allegedly groped a teenage girl in Times Square, then punched her father in the face. He's also accused of beating a man and stealing a car. And stealing someone's credit and debit and public benefit cards. He had 8 prior felony convictions, 19 misdemeanor convictions, and 12 failures to appear. I can go on, but I was only given 2 minutes, which I think I've already gone over. But with that said, what is our mayor doing? They're looking to cut the police budget once again, 3%. Bill de Blasio had cut it $1 billion. The mayor is doing a 3% slash. And, you know, a lot of the policies, by the way, that have been adopted by New York are now being mimicked up here. We saw a couple of bills this year that would lead to police resources being taken away, their qualified immunity protection being taken away. Nancy Pelosi even tried to put bail reform in the COVID relief package before I was elected. And lastly, I want to talk about just fentanyl, because in my district, fentanyl deaths are already up 13% this year. And we know that it's coming from our southern border. So it's a combination of the federal policies and the state policies under one-party Democrat rule that have been a disaster and are leading to my constituents and so many Americans across the nation being less safe. And to give you an example of how that policy, you have this open border, and then we had a pair of suspected drug cartel smugglers who were busted in New York with $1.2 million in meth. And what happened? They were released right back onto the street thanks to New York's bail law. So these are the ramifications of the policies that we're seeing put forth. They're putting the drug cartels, they're putting the career criminals, and they're putting the bad guys ahead of law-abiding, tax-paying citizens, and we must put an end to it, and we intend to do so come January. Thank you.
We will now hear from our whip, Steve Scalise.
Thanks, Elise. Good morning. President Biden and Speaker Pelosi continue to show how out of touch and tone deaf they are by throwing a party yesterday at the White House to celebrate inflation. at the exact same time that the market's crashing because of inflation that President Biden and Speaker Pelosi created. You would think they would be paying attention to the struggle that families are facing, and you would think that they would bring us back here to Washington to put bills on the floor to fix these problems they created. But unfortunately, that's not what we're doing. Yet again, another week of no bills on the floor to lower gas prices, to lower costs that are crushing hardworking families, to do anything to secure the border. You talk about being tone deaf and out of touch. Kamala Harris over the weekend said that the border is secure. Maybe she says that because she hasn't been to the border to see how out of control it is because they've opened up the border. And as Nicole talked about, this is creating problems for families all across the country. We had over 100,000 deaths of young people last year from fentanyl and other drug overdoses because the border's open. Most of those drugs are being made in China and brought across our open southern border. Sorry, Kamala, the border is not secure. And in fact, it's so open that over 100,000 Americans died last year. Young people that aren't going to school today, that aren't going home to their families for dinner, because they won't secure the southern border. And so when you look at all of these problems, as I've gone around the country, not only throughout my district in South Louisiana, but so many other districts, over the last month, you hear the same pleas from families saying, we wish Washington was actually addressing these problems. Well, the good news is we have a plan and help will be on the way. We're going to be rolling out our commitment to America in just a few days to show the country how a Republican majority would actually solve these problems that President Biden and Nancy Pelosi and the far leftists have created. You know, just look at California. And as David Valadao talked about the problems they're dealing with, you had California just a few weeks ago pass a law banning oil and gas produced cars. You can't drive a car driven that's fueled by fossil fuels in California in a few years because they want everybody to have to go to electric cars. And the same week, they actually came out, Gavin Newsom said, you can't plug your electric car into the house plug to charge it up because their grid is so unstable that they can't even charge electric cars. So they're going to make you use electric cars. They're going to ban gasoline-powered cars. At the same time, they're telling you you can't plug your car into your household electric socket because they don't have energy. Where do they think energy comes from? You're not plugging your car into a tree. You need some stable energy sources, and a lot of that would be fossil fuels, but they're against fossil fuels. Here in America, they're okay with getting it from Russia and other tyrannical dictators. And so we have a plan to solve these problems. We're going to continue pushing for them here. I wish we had bills on the floor to address those here. We've laid out to Speaker Pelosi what those bills are that would lower gas prices, that would provide a stable energy supply, that would lower inflation, that would secure our border. But they won't bring any of those bills to the House floor because they want to continue doubling down on their inflation-ridden policies, raising taxes, raising spending to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars, hiring 87,000 IRS agents to go after lower-income people. And yes, the CBO confirmed it after they passed the bill. Over $20 billion in new taxes that are going to be paid for by people making less than $400,000 a year, which breaks Joe Biden's pledge. He knew it before he signed the bill, and he signed the bill anyway, and they held a party at the White House yesterday celebrating the fact that they're raising taxes on lower-income families to give special interest giveaways to their rich friends, all while the market's collapsing. That's how out of touch they are. Republicans have a plan to solve these problems, and we're going to continue pushing for them. Yes?
So you were just explaining the solutions you guys have. If you could just explain to the American people specifically what would be the top priority and kind of just a little bit of what impact you expect that to have. And also secondly, Democrats were just up here pushing the label MAGA extreme Republicans. How do you plan to separate yourself from that label and counter that narrative?
Yeah, the country's tired of all the divisiveness. I think both sides, Republicans and Democrats, universally panned Joe Biden's negative speech that he held out in front of Independence Hall with the red lighting and the anger and the fury that he had. People are tired of that kind of divisiveness, and what they're asking for is solutions. And Joe Biden doesn't have answers. That's why he's yelling and calling people names. He's calling half of America fascist. People are fed up with that. What they're asking Joe Biden is, how are you going to solve these problems you created? And he doesn't have an answer. The good news is we do have an answer. And so to get to your first part of your question, what we're rolling out in the commitment are a number of items that we would bring to the House floor if we were in the majority to solve these problems, to get back to a focus on the issues that hardworking families care about. You know, when you get outside of the bubble of D.C. and you talk to people in communities, they're struggling and they're paying too much for everything, and they just want Washington to address these problems. So we're going to bring bills to lower inflation, to lower energy costs. It's not just the gasoline costs you're paying at the pump, which are more than double digits over what they were 2 years ago. It's when you go to the grocery store. It's when you pay your electric bill, whether it's the summer and you're trying to cool your home, or this winter, if it gets cold and you're trying to heat your home. In many parts of the Northeast, they don't even have enough energy to heat their homes because they block pipelines. They block the ability to get energy, so you can't even get heating oil. And so we're going to bring bills to fix those problems. We're going to bring bills to secure America's southern border. We're going to show the country how to do this. We need a Republican majority to do it. It'd be nice if you had a Senate that would bring those bills up as well, but we're at least going to show the country what we would do. And look, I think it's going to create a lot of enthusiasm. People are hungry for bold conservative ideas to fix these problems. And then if we do get a majority, we will have a mandate to go do those things, and we will at least show the country a better way.
Last question.
Thanks so much. Heritage Action is lobbying against the latest White House request for more Ukraine aid. I understand there are probably the votes in the current Congress who pass that, but if you do take the majority, how are you going to handle growing calls in your caucus to kind of scale back the amount of support we're giving to Ukraine?
I think what you're seeing is there are a lot of members that want to see more accountability in the Department of Defense and more of a focus on the threats that are out there. And look, Joe Biden was asleep at the wheel early off before Russia invaded Ukraine when they were asking for some basic tools to defend themselves. And for whatever reason, Joe Biden said no. And now we're in a much more of a crisis mode. Let's stop governing by crisis and look at the real threats that are down the road. China is moving very aggressively to build up a naval fleet. And right now, our naval fleet is in decline. And Joe Biden has not put a plan together to address the threats that are out there, not just today, but down the road. And that's what we're going to be putting a focus on.
So going forward, can we expect the same level of support that we provide?
Well, we haven't seen the bill. And again, this gets to, their basic failure to govern as a majority under Speaker Pelosi. We're literally days away from a government shutdown, and the party in majority in the House, Senate, and White House hasn't even filed a bill to prevent a government shutdown. They keep talking about a bill that's going to be filed that's going to have billions in new spending for this and billions for that. They're not working with us on a bill that can actually show how to responsibly fund the government at the adequate levels and address real problems families are facing. They won't bring those bills to the floor. They won't even file the bill. Maybe she's waiting until September 30th, the midnight hour, like Nancy Pelosi normally does. We'll do one more.
Senator Graham introduced a 15-week abortion ban bill. I know House Republicans have a similar version. Is that something a House Republican majority would put on the floor?
Well, first, we need to see what our majority looks like. But I think if you've seen, we are a party that defends life. We stand up for life. The Born Alive Act is a bill we've been trying to bring to the floor. Every single member of the Republican conference is a co-sponsor of the bill that says if a baby's born alive outside the womb, that baby should not be able to be murdered and call it abortion. And yet states like New York currently do that today. And so the Democrats won't even bring a bill like that up. I will tell you this, and they want to try to contort this issue every day. They don't want to talk about the fact that their party has gotten so extreme that they went from a party that used to say that they wanted abortions to be rare. Today, they want to mandate abortion all the way up until the birth of the child and have taxpayer funding pay for it. That's not where America is. And so, we defend life not just inside the womb, which we're proud to do, but we also defend life in communities where you're seeing crime overtake so many cities. And as Nicole talked about, Democrats want to let the criminals back out. They don't want to just defund the police, which they've done in many big cities. They've defunded the police, and that's having devastating consequences on crime. But they're also now going to no cash bail, letting criminals out without even paying a dime after they've been charged with violent crimes, and they go commit more violent crimes. So people aren't even safe in their communities. They don't respect life there. They don't respect life in our communities where you're seeing over 100,000 kids being killed by fentanyl overdoses that are coming across their open southern border. So if they actually respected life inside the womb, outside the womb, in communities all across America, they'd be working with us to fix these problems, but they won't because they just don't care. And I think they're going to pay for it on November 8th at the polls. Thank you all.